Really late night on day one of the SEC tournament. Busy week for Kendall Rogers and for the entire crew at D1 Baseball. They'll have tournament coverage from all over the country. Kendall, I want to start you off today with a fill in the blank. Okay? You ready for this?
Uh-oh.
For the 2023 postseason, don't let the blank get hot.
Oh,
Fill
boy.
in the blank for me. Don't let the blank get hot.
I mean, after what we've seen the first 8 innings, do we throw A&M into the Ole Miss mix here, like a preseason, top 5 team that was very average all year long, and like they're one hitting Tennessee right now at the SEC tournament? Maybe, I don't know.
It's kind of a homer pick, Kendall.
It's not a homer pick. Well, okay, so I'll tell you what. That's not a homer pick. They were. I mean, honestly, if you look at last year for Ole Miss and you look at this year for A&M, it's actually very similar profiles. But I think if you look around the country, I think you look at TCU out of the Big 12. They're a team that I thought coming into the season was going to be really good. They certainly had some bumps and bruises, but I think they're a club that when you look at their pitching, you look at the fact they're finally healthy offensively again. They're a team I've got my eyeballs on. Tennessee has been playing well, but Tennessee was a team too that I thought if they could play well in Hoover and get in the NCAA tournament and get in a favorable regional, I thought they could go on a roll and win the national championship. And then out west, I'm really intrigued to see what happens with some of those middle of the road Pac-12 teams like USC. USC's finally going to get back to the postseason. They're a club that I think if they can just show up at the Pac-12 tournament, get in, and they can make a run. So there are a few candidates.
Okay, I don't dislike any of those ideas. So we'll see where it goes. Yesterday, you guys put out an updated regional projection list. You had Southern Miss instead of the 2 seed in Baton Rouge as the 2 seed in Tuscaloosa. At this point, how close is Southern Miss to that number 16 spot?
I think if they go on a run in the conference tournament, they're going to be very, very difficult to deny. I just think when you look at this team overall, the RPI sitting at 28. They've got pretty decent metrics. They have a winning record on the road. Their top 100 record's solid. They finished, a game behind Coastal, who's like a slam dunk top 16. I just think if they went through that tournament, let's say they got to the championship game, I think they should be hosting. I think they've done enough at that point to look back and say, hey, you know what, they passed the eyeball test. This is a team that should definitely be hosting. With that said, it really depends on what happens around them. Does East Carolina go on a run in the American tournament, win that tournament? The Oklahoma State and or Texas and West Virginia go on a run in the Big 12 tournament. Both those teams play for the championship, and all of a sudden both of those teams are hosting. So while, I say that Southern Miss getting to Sunday would put them in pretty good position, that's not to say that someone else doesn't have a better week. So it's very fluid, but I would think they should be a host if they did what I just said.
Yeah, that makes sense, and we were talking about that earlier. And the bottom line is, it's just nothing happens in a vacuum, right? You can't just lay out of if they do this, then this happens, because
Correct.
There's so much else that is happening all around the country.
Yeah, you're putting yourself in a bad position if you guarantee things.
Kendall, I know you don't believe this because you and your coworkers at D1 Baseball had them hosting. Is there any scenario, even if Alabama deserves to host, sitting at 12 in the RPI right now, where that committee is going to look at what happened with Brad Bohannon and go, yeah, I know it wasn't these players, I know it wasn't these kids, but they fired their coach in the middle of the season for betting on college baseball or providing information for someone betting on baseball. Could the committee potentially hold that against Alabama, even if their resume says they should be hosting?
As much as I like John, I would have a field day with him if they'd end up hosting just because of that. And that was one of the reasons that was said. I just think when you look at what Alabama's done since the Bohannon fired, winning a series over Vanderbilt, actually beating Vanderbilt 11-2 the day that he was fired. You look at what they did against A&M on the road, scoring 22 runs or 23 runs, in the final 2 games of the series to win that, and then sweeping Ole Miss in pretty easy fashion. That's a really impressive finish considering what they went through. So I actually look more at that and how they responded to that adversity more so, frankly, than I even look at the rest of the season. So I would hope it would not hurt them, but I mean, it wouldn't be the first time the committee's done something that I'm just like shaking my head at. So we'll see.
You guys have got Wake Forest as the number 1 overall seed. Our condolences to Wake Forest for not winning the national championship. If history holds true, I mean, it's been a really long time. But on a slightly more serious note, when you look at some of the likely top 8s, who of that group, and we're talking Wake Forest, LSU, Arkansas, Florida, Virginia, I think is the 8th seed there. I don't have the projections pulled up in front of me, is most likely to get bounced? Like, their body of work deserves to be a top 8, but you look at them and you go, I don't think that's an Omaha team.
Yeah, you're just saying gets bounced in the postseason, not necessarily on selection day.
Exactly. I mean, I'm
saying,
I think, earns that top 8. Okay.
I think Clemson and Arkansas, I really and truly, again, Dave Van Horn, incredible job. He should have won the SEC Coach of the Year. I love what they've done this year. I just think at some point, I'm concerned about just their pitching, how it kind of stacks up in a regional or super. I think the other team for me is Clemson. I mean, they've been so hot. They've won 7 straight ACC series. They swept 4 out of their last 5 ACC series. Like, at some point, that run's got to stop, right? I mean, at some point, you've got to resort back to the mean a little bit, and so that kind of worries me about them. And then the last team for me is LSU. I think LSU, outside of Paul Skeens, is extremely, extremely vulnerable. So it would not shock me if LSU is not in Omaha.
You may have a better feel for this based on what Jay Johnson has done. It's something we were talking about in the first hour. Do you think, and we may have chatted with you about this last week, forgive me if we've already talked about this, do you think Jay Johnson will hold Paul Skeens for the second game of the regional?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. I think as if he
you would pitch him against a 4 seed.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't want to be that coach at LSU to lose the 4 seed. I don't think the locals will handle that very well. I just think you can't take that chance. Yeah, again, I will say this. It depends on what your 4 seed is. I mean, if you're hosting Alabama State, then I think you look at it differently than if you're hosting, Oral Roberts, who, won who's going to win 47 games and actually beat good teams in midweek. I think it all depends on who you're playing. But I mean, if it's a halfway decent 4 seed, I would start him. I wouldn't even mess around with it.
But isn't the counter argument to that the goal is not to win one game, it's to win the regional? Or it's to win the first 2 games because the team that goes 2-0 overwhelmingly wins the regional?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. But, I mean, the fact of the matter is, in the 2 and 3 game, you're going to be facing the number 2 guy for the other team. So, to me, that's more of a straight-up matchup than you going against somebody's ace. Because, some of these teams, like ORU, they've got legitimate frontline dudes in the number 1 spot. So I think, if you look at that second game, you're going 2 versus 2. And so my feeling is really win the first game if you can, just get that out of the way. And you know what? If you can't win 2 versus 2, let's say against Southern Miss at home, you're probably not getting Omaha anyway.
Yeah. Who does the SEC tournament matter the most for this year?
Well, I was going to say A&M, but they certainly look like they're on the way to winning, although it's the 9th inning and they're only up a couple of runs. But, I think if you look at the logjam with some of those hosts, I mean, I feel pretty good, pretty confident about Auburn as a host right now. I mean, 17 SEC wins. They've got some pretty good metrics. They went out and played good teams in our conference. But I think when you look at, Tennessee, you look at South Carolina, Alabama, Kentucky, South Carolina are fascinating cases to me. You got a team with an RPI 2, a team with an RPI 6. We had South Carolina out, yesterday. They win today against Georgia. I think another win by South Carolina would really throw the toasting situation in the SEC for a loop. Because at that point, it's like Kentucky, Alabama, Auburn, and South Carolina all would probably deserve to host. I think if Tennessee ends up losing this 8-in game, I think you can cross them off the sheet. But that still leaves you with 4 teams for 3 spots.
Yeah, we'll see how it all shakes out. Can I just be honest with you, man? You know how much we love college baseball, and you know how much it means in the state of Mississippi. This sucks, man, with Ole Miss and Mississippi State just being out of it. It's just not fun.
Yeah, it's weird, man. It's like the one thing that the Magnolia State fans look forward to every year, and it's like it's over, and we got to watch everybody else. But if I'm State and I'm Ole Miss, and I'm players in those programs, like there's nothing that can motivate me more than sitting at home right now.
Yeah,
and maybe that's something they can use to their advantage next year.
Here's hoping. Thanks, Kendall. Great catching up. Enjoy the weekend.
You got it, buddy. Be good. Thank you.